As Jenny has said, at this election there's going to be a very clear choice on the ballot paper. Two visions of Brexit. Labour's approach, which is going to be based on our values. So let me just set those out, because they're values of internationalism, of being outward-looking, of a belief that we achieve more together than we do alone. A fundamental belief that internationally we should face challenges together with other countries and take advantages and opportunities with other countries. Now, as Jenny has said, we accept that things will have to change. Our relationship with the EU is going to change. But we do not accept that Brexit has to mean whatever Theresa May says it means. We do not accept that there has to be a reckless Tory Brexit. And that's a fundamental issue in this election. It's a fundamental issue for everybody who will be voting. We don't believe that if you're a citizen of the world, you're a citizen of nowhere. Of course we recognise and accept that immigration rules are going to have to change when we leave the EU. Let me say that again. We accept that immigration rules are going to have to change when we leave the EU. But we don't accept that immigration should be the only overarching priority, the only red line. Nor do we believe that leaving the EU means that we have to sever all of our ties with Europe. That Brexit means weakening workers' rights, environmental protections, or that it must entail slashing corporate taxes. We have a very different vision. A vision about how Brexit can work for Britain and the EU. And at its heart, is a belief that we need to build a close, collaborative future relationship with the EU. A changed relationship, but a relationship, and a collaborative future relationship. Not members, of course, but genuine partners going forward, where jobs, the economy, and retaining the benefits of the single market and customs union are the priority, where hard-fought workplace rights and environmental protections are protected, where we are truly an open, outward-looking country, and where EU nationals living here are guaranteed their rights and can live in certainty that Brexit will not affect them. A Brexit that brings the country together, that radically devolves power and supports all regions and nations of the UK. And that's the approach to Brexit that I want to set out briefly this morning. But let me deal with this head on and summarise the key differences. The Prime Minister has adopted an ideologically approached view of Brexit. And where has it led her? It's led her down a slippery slope. Nothing to do with the single market. Nothing to do with the customs union. Nothing to do with the European Court or any court. Nothing to do with the very many agencies that do such fantastic collaborative work that's so important to all of us. Out of all of those, an approach that's led her to that place. And what does that mean? That means taking option after option off the table at the beginning of the negotiations. Talking up no deal as if that's acceptable. Some people say, well, that's a clear approach. It's a rigid approach. It is removing options before we've started. And it's a reckless approach. What Labour will do is to scrap the Brexit white paper and draw up new negotiating objectives. We will, on day one, unilaterally guarantee the rights of EU citizens in this country and work and, of course, fight for the rights of UK citizens across Europe. We will scrap the Great Repeal Bill and replace it with what it should be, an EU Rights and Protections Bill. We will give a proper role to Parliament in the process, not sideline it and treat all challenge as frustration or dissent. And we will, of course, rebuild Britain by investing in people, in a future that is fairer for all. So let me deal first with the White Paper and the negotiating priorities. Labour's White Paper will have a strong emphasis on retaining the benefits of the single market and customs union, vital as they are to protecting our economy. Our paper will make crystal clear that jobs and the economy are Labour's priority throughout. And that means that we will seek continued tariff-free access between the UK and the EU, that we will seek no new non-tariff customs burdens, that we will ensure alignment, regulatory alignment, and that we will remain competitive in services as well as goods, retaining the all-important threshold of workplace rights so there's no race to the bottom as we go forward. Now, I've been all over the country talking to businesses large and small, communities large and small, trade unionists, and all of them sing with one voice on the need for these benefits to be the central part of the negotiations. Now, whether this is best achieved through reformed membership of the single market and the customs union or via some bespoke trading arrangement is secondary to the outcome. What matters for jobs, the economy and living standards is that we retain the benefits that really matter. And let me tell you this, what cannot be negotiated, because these negotiations are not going to be easy, what cannot be negotiated, we will replicate back here in the UK. And let me give you an example. Regulatory alignment. We will fight hard for our businesses and the people who work in those businesses to ensure that there are no impediments going forward. We want businesses to succeed in the future in the way they've succeeded in the past. And if we can't get the regulatory alignment we need through the negotiations in Brussels, we will achieve it back at home by primary legislation. If there's any issue on workplace rights in the negotiation, we'll achieve it back home through primary legislation. What matters is when the end arrangement, the end package is met, we've met the commitment of the same benefits of the single market and the customs union. So important are they. So that means we need to focus, not on hypothetical trade deals with other countries, but on strong trading arrangements with the EU. After all, the EU accounts for 44% of our exports, by far and away the most important trading partner. It is extraordinary that the first act of the Prime Minister was to give up on the single market and the customs union, even before negotiations had begun. And it was received very badly by our EU partners as a message as to how far outside any collaborative future relationship she wanted to be. But not only that, she has spoken up, talked up the chances of no deal being reached. She said repeatedly, no deal is better than a bad deal. No deal is better than a bad deal. Labour are very clear that no deal is the worst possible deal. It would cause huge damage to our businesses, to our trade. The examples just make that absolutely clear. Tariffs, if no deal, of 30 to 40% on dairy and meat products, 10% on cars, and a loss of passporting rights for the financial services. And I was with Vauxhall yesterday, and the anxiety about that outcome is etched on the face of everybody who works there and everybody who works in so many of our businesses across the country. No wonder the CBI have called it a recipe for chaos. A Labour approach will be clear, and to end this reckless approach. And will be clear, that we need to negotiate strong transitional arrangements as we leave the EU and ensure there is no cliff edge for our economy. So reject no deal as a viable option and introduce and fight for transitional arrangements from the start. But we will also approach the task differently. Theresa May wants to close down scrutiny and challenge. In truth, that lies partly behind her decision to call an election. The idea that she should be challenged or questioned in Parliament in a meaningful way is something she cannot brook. She will not have. She wants to knock that out the way. And everybody knows that strong leaders and strong decisions welcome scrutiny and accountability, welcome challenge. That's how the right decisions are arrived at. And these decisions are so important. We cannot duck this issue. So Labour will take a different approach. We will work with Parliament, not against Parliament. We will legislate to ensure there is a meaningful vote at the end of the exercise, something the Prime Minister refused to do. And of course, we will insist on and put in place regular reporting back throughout the process so that we can get the views of Parliament, so that we can be challenged, so that we can ensure we're on the right track and make sure that when we get to that all-important vote at the end of the exercise, Parliament has played its role throughout the process. And of course, we need to work with the devolved administrations to reflect their specific and particular concerns. But we have to also rebuild our relations with our EU partners because they have been damaged by the tone and approach that's been taken so far. And striking a good deal does rely on having alliances across Europe. And that's why, as I said at the outset, what we need is that close, collaborative future relationship with the EU. Not partners, not members, but partners. Continued cooperation in all the other fields that matter: technology, science, medicine, counter-terrorism, climate change, higher education. So a Labour government will seek to remain part of the Erasmus scheme so that British students have the same cultural and educational opportunities after we leave the EU. We will ensure the UK maintains our leading research role by staying part of Horizon 2020 and its successor programmes, and by welcoming research staff from the EU. We will also seek to maintain membership or equivalent relations with European organisations which offer benefits to the EU, such as Euratom, the European Medicines Agency, Europol and Eurojust. Remember that part of the Prime Minister's speech where she said she wanted out of all parts of the EU, all parts, including those agencies. Now, I've worked with Europol and with Eurojust, and I know what they do 24/7 to help keep us and our EU partners and everybody within our countries safe. And to simply walk away from those agencies on ideological grounds, rather than starting negotiations saying, we want to stay in, we want to find a way, is fundamentally the wrong approach, and we will reverse that. Let me deal then with EU nationals, because we will also adopt a new approach here. It is shameful that the Prime Minister rejected repeated attempts by Labour to resolve this issue before Article 50 was triggered. As a result, 3 million EU nationals have suffered unnecessary uncertainty, as well, of course, as the 1.2 million UK citizens living in the EU. It's often said that EU nationals contribute to our society, and so they do. But they are part of our society. They are part of our society, and they should not be used as bargaining chips. So on day one of a Labour government, we will immediately guarantee that all EU nationals currently living in the UK will see no change in their legal status as a result of Brexit. Day one, big commitment. That does not mean, as some people like to portray, that we will not fight equally hard for UK citizens in the EU. It does not mean that at all. But we can do that. It is in our gift. It's within our power to do on day one. And I genuinely think it will help the chances of a reciprocal arrangement for our citizens across Europe. The strong message to me in discussions across Europe in the last 6 months has been that an act such as that would be warmly welcome and is seen as an indication of the sort of relationship that the UK wants with the EU. And it would unblock a blockage which this Prime Minister cannot guarantee will be resolved within the 2 years. She hopes, but she cannot guarantee. We will guarantee it, we'll do it, and we'll do it on day one. There could be no clearer signal that the Labour Party wants a close and collaborative relationship with our EU partners. So I can assure you that will be in our manifesto. We will also set out further detail about how we'll reset Britain and our approach. Firstly, we will drop the Tories' Great Repeal Bill. The EU has had a huge impact, as all of you know, on securing workplace protections and environmental standards, consumer protections, human rights. That's one of the main reasons Labour and the trade union movement campaigned so hard to stay in the EU. And I made that argument up and down the country as passionately as I could. But we all know, because we were there in the campaign, that for many Brexiteers in the Tory party, this was why they wanted to leave. This is why they wanted to leave. It's why Priti Patel, now in the cabinet, spoke during the referendum of wanting to, in her words, halve the burdens of EU social and employment legislation. Half the burdens, as she saw it. And let's be honest about this election. If a Tory government is returned with a majority, they will not be able to resist the temptation to water down and remove these vital rights when they get the first opportunity to do so. We do not consider these rights and protections as burdens or accept that there should be any weakening of these rights or protections. So instead of the Great Repeal Bill, we will introduce an EU Rights and Protections Bill. The name makes it clear what it is, an EU Rights and Protections Bill. That will make sure that all the rights that we all enjoy in this country because of our membership of the EU, workplace rights, consumer rights, environmental rights, human rights, are fully protected in our law without qualification, without limitation, and without sunset clauses. A Labour approach to Brexit will ensure there can be no rolling back of these key rights and protections. But we'll go further, because simply protecting the rights and protections we've got could never be the height of the ambition for an incoming Labour government. So we will work with our EU partners, with trade unions and businesses to ensure outside the EU, the UK does not lag behind Europe in these rights and protections as we go forward. There can be no space, no gap left for a race to the bottom, the unhooking, unhinging and allowing for lower standards in this country than there will be across Europe. That brings me to another commitment that we will have in our manifesto, a presumption that any devolved powers that are transferred back from Brussels should go straight to the relevant devolved body. And no power grab in Whitehall. This will apply to regional government across England as well as to devolved administrations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And this, as you know, was a proposal included by the Mayor of London in his Brexit white paper, and it's one that Labour will take forward. So Labour's approach will be part of a radical extension of devolution and will help bring the country together. But of course, the Brexit deal, getting the right deal, getting the right arrangements for our country internationally is only half of the story. We have to understand what lay beneath the vote on the 23rd of June last year, and what and why people were asking us for change, as Jenny said. So Labour's approach to Brexit will also contribute to how we rebuild a fairer, more progressive country. The debate over Brexit is not happening in a vacuum. It will be shaped by the approach the government that you elect takes to a whole range of issues: security, taxation, public services, the environment and education. We need a Labour government that will deliver a real living wage, giving a pay rise to 5 million people, will invest in public services. And I know, having run a public service for 5 years, how much we need to invest in our public services and tackle the housing crisis. Invest in the NHS and invest in our schools. That has to be part of the approach to Brexit, the right deal and the domestic dealing with the issues that are so there for us to deal with in this election. That is the choice on the ballot paper at this election. If Theresa May gets another 5 years in power, she will take it as a green light to sideline Parliament, ignore opposition and drive through a reckless Tory Brexit, a rigid Brexit. She will isolate us from our nearest partners and strike trade deals with any country that will talk to us, no matter what the consequences for workers' rights, environmental protections, or our place in the world. The only way to stop that and to build a fairer Britain is to elect a Labour government. A Labour government that will reset our approach to Brexit, rebuild relations with the EU, and make sure that jobs, the economy and rights come first. We have just over 6 weeks to make that case, and make it we will. Thank you very much.